Okay, I believe it is 9:02, so we're going to look to get started. Let me go here, go here. Okay, so as people come in, they will come directly in. Good morning. I want to welcome everyone here this morning. We're here to really talk about the PPP application for forgiveness and the other related items that are connected to the stimulus. As you can see up on your screen, we're Tyler Collier Associates. We're a CPA firm. I think everyone knows us because you were on our invites to come and join us. A lot of our clients have received the PPP, and we thought it would be a good thing for us to do a session on this forgiveness because that would be a wonderful thing if you can get a set of dollars to cover your payroll, cover your employees, and then get it forgiven and didn't have to pay it back. That's definitely a feather in your cap. So we will cover that PPP forgiveness application and some of the related information. We will also take a look at the EIDL loan. We will also look at state unemployment and what's going on with state unemployment. And then we will end up with the new stimulus act that is a little held up in Congress. So I just want to introduce real quick our team who worked on a lot of this information. We have Terry Collier, who is the founder of Tyler Collier Associates, CPA, 30, 40 years
Morning, everybody.
of experience. We also have Amber Spells, who's our tax in charge, has a master's degree in taxation, and has also done a lot of our research to make sure that the information we're about to give you is accurate and up to date as it is now. Because we know we're in unprecedented times, and these things are changing daily. So the application came out on May 15th, and already there's been changes and lobby to make other changes. We also have John Harris from Harris Financial, who we work with a lot with our clients in financial planning, insurance, and so forth. And we have David Herman, who is a CPA, currently works, matter of fact, has a load of experience in working with industries and is currently CFO working for several different companies. So that's our team. I will keep them unmuted so that they can tie in at any time and add to the information that we're about to embark on and run through. All right. Questions. Amber also will be controlling the chat. So if you see the chat at the bottom of your screen, if you have questions, we don't want everyone speaking at the same time. If you would type your questions in there, when we get to the question periods, Amber will read those questions and we will begin to answer those questions to the best of our knowledge for the information that is available. So let's get started. PPP forgiveness. All right. So one thing I want everybody to know, if anybody is on this call or you know somebody who has not applied, there is still money available to apply for. And so it will remain open until June 30th, or if the funds run out beforehand. So we would encourage you, highly encourage you, if you have not applied, or if you know someone who would be eligible to apply. Application, like I said earlier, the application for forgiveness was released on May 15th. Final guidance is still on its way. It's coming just like the PPP application. Things are changing as we speak. What we say today may not be the total case tomorrow, but the general theme is the government is looking to cover 2 months of your payroll expenses, eh, and potentially another 25% of that total, for other expenses. And we'll get into some of that, but the government is looking to assist you in a 2-month period. The application itself is an SBA application, and it's Form 3508, and it is currently, the deadline for applying is 90 days after your cover period is over. So your cover period starts from when you received your funds, and there's an alternative, and we'll talk about that as well, from when you received your funds, um, to the 56 days, which is basically 8 weeks. That's that period. 90 days after that period, you want to file for your forgiveness. That forgiveness is also filed with your banker, not directly with SBA. Not directly with SBA. It is filed with your banker. All right, cover period. So that cover period is those 8 weeks in which, from when you receive those funds, you're supposed to be spending these dollars. And there's a whole lot of things that go on with that and are attached to that. So you want to make sure that you mark the date that you receive those funds and take a look at when your payrolls fall. So if you have a payroll, so you can have an alternate period. So if you have a payroll that fell right after you received those funds, you can count that payroll, even though that cost was incurred prior. You can include that in your forgiveness application. Restaurants are also requesting to extend these dates about 24 weeks instead of 8 weeks, which also makes some sense because they have been very hurt, and for them to gear back up, they're thinking it's going to take longer than an 8-week period. The forgiveness cap is $15,385 per individual, per employee. That is calculated basically at the $100,000 cap divided by 52 weeks times the 8 weeks. So you cannot, that is your cap. You cannot go over that amount. And then you have the 75-25 rule, 75% or more, but 75% is allocated to payroll cost, and 25% can be used for qualified non-payroll cost. And we'll talk about that, but basically it's your rent, your interest on a mortgage. So there are other costs that you can include. They are also receiving a lot of requests to remove this rule as well. So we'll see how that changes and how things change according to that. Qualified non-payroll expenses. That's your rent, your lease payments for real estate for your main office. If you have more than one office, it can cover more than one office. Also, if you're buying your building, you own your building, the interest on that mortgage is forgivable. Utilities, and this is important, what's included in utilities is, of course, electric, gas, water, telephone, internet. And in that category, even though we broke it out here, they have transportation. The guidance on transportation is still forthcoming, and we're waiting for some of that guidance on transportation. Agreements like your lease agreement should be in place prior to the February 15th, 2020 date. And then your billing. So it's costs, again, what we're trying to capture is costs that is incurred during that 8-week period, because the theory is to get you back up and running to maintain your employee count. And to talk about your employee count, you also have to talk about your head count. So if you had 10 employees that you put on your original application, or 20 employees, they're looking for you to keep that head count at that same level. And so if you don't keep your head count, there are potential penalties in the calculation. Of course, if people left and you haven't paid them, you won't get forgiveness for what you haven't paid. But you could end up with some penalty if you didn't keep your employee headcount at the same level. As long as you bring and keep your employee count to the same level by June 30th, 2020, you should not receive a penalty. And so the guidance on this is still up in the air, because that does suggest that if I got my employee count right back to my 20 or 10 or whatever that number is at June 30th, and then lay them off the next day, does it still qualify? So I'm sure we will be getting a lot of clarification on those issues. Again, changes are happening rapidly, because as they put this out and scenarios continue to happen, they're responding to them and trying to keep things to the spirit of which these loans and forgiveness are given. Application support. So this is going to be extremely important, and I would try not to complicate things. I would try to keep things very straightforward. They're going to want bank statements to see what you spent, when you spent it, payroll records, there are some calculations in the application and some information that you don't have to give them with the application, but you should maintain it about your headcount and your average salaries, your payroll, tax forms, federal and state. You will need to make sure that you have those. Your banker is probably going to ask you for that information. Canceled checks, copies of bill statements, lease agreements. If you had employees resign, the letters of resignation. We talked about a scenario yesterday. I know Amber and I did, about if an employee said, "Wow, I'm making more than I was making for your organization on unemployment, so I'm not coming back." Some of that detail you will need, because you may even be able to contest the fact that that person continues to receive unemployment. So documentation will be very important. You will also sign off on you will also certify that you have used this money correctly and you haven't used it for other things than what is designed. And so there is a list in the application of things that you will certify that you are adhering to. Also put together some general questions, frequently asked questions to run through. When will I know that the loan is forgiven? Right now, the way we understand the information is within 60 days of your submission of the form, you should get indication that how much of your loan has been forgiven, and that it has been forgiven. And again, guys, as we're going through these question and answer period tie-in, at least my group tie-in at any time, so that we can clarify any group of information. What happens to if the entire amount is not forgiven? Well, and you'll see when we run through some of the examples, if it's not forgiven, then you have a loan. And so you have a very good loan, a 1% with great terms paid over 24 months. And you can prepay without any penalty. So if you want to just pay that loan back, you can do that without any penalty, or you can pay it over the 2-year period. May you pay bonuses from your PPP? That's been the question of the week this week. And we believe that no, it was not intended for people to have extra money. It was intended to keep you whole, to keep your employees, to keep your employee count. And there is a cap. So if you're going to use some of these bonuses and things, you cannot do that over the cap itself, as well as for owners, you can't be paid more than you were paid in the prior year. And it's also going to look at the pay rate that you applied for the dollars by employee. So it may be quite difficult to carve out. I can think of some circumstances that bonuses may be applicable, but it may be very hard to carve that out. I would make sure that you're working with a professional or someone who's on top of that, so that you don't get yourself in trouble there. How do we record the forgiveness? We are recommending, and the related expenses, we are recommending that, one, when you sign for this, you did sign for it as a loan, you should put it on your books as a loan. As you're recording those expenditures, you should record those expenditures just like you would normally record those expenditures, utilities, payroll, etc. And then once we get guidance on the forgiveness and how those things will affect your tax returns in the future, we will pass on that information. Okay, but that's guidance that's still coming on how the forgiveness of those loans, or it should not be income. The intent is not to make that income for you. So we will look at that guidance as that guidance comes to us. Okay, so this is also a very big item. If you receive the EIDL loan advance, it will be deducted from your PPP forgiveness. So if you've got $100,000 in your PPP application, and you use the whole 100,000, but you also receive that advance from the EIDL, it will reduce the amount to $90,000 that you will get forgiven. We'll talk about that a little more.
That's if you get the full 10,000.
And that's if you got the full 10,000, because that did change. It started at 10,000 per organization, and then it moved to $1,000 per employee. So some people who thought that they were going to get a $10,000 advance, especially your self-employed, ended up with a $1,000 check because they're the only employee. What about owner compensation benefits? Are they forgiven? Well, it is limited, especially for your self-employed, your sole proprietor. It's limited to that net income. So if you had losses in the prior year, you may not be able to have some income forgiven. If you're on payroll, like a S corp or partnership, that payroll should be in the mix and should be forgiven. Retirement payments, health insurance payments are not eligible for forgiveness to owners. Payroll taxes for employees and benefits, yes, employee benefits are forgivable. So you should keep track of what those expenses are. They are a forgivable expense, but payroll taxes paid from February to June for those employees are not deductible for forgiveness. Okay. Payments to employees who live outside the U.S. Are not deductible for the, or not eligible, excuse me, for forgiveness.
Gilbert, go back,
Oh, go back.
please.
Yes.
Yeah, because I think, I'm not sure that I heard you correctly. I think that you said the payroll taxes are not, but it's just the employer share that is not eligible for the application.
Correct. The employer's share of those taxes paid from February 15th to June are not forgivable.
Right.
Yes.
And under those circumstances, there is a payroll retention tax credit that you may be eligible for to take care of the employer share of your federal tax.
Right. We actually did cover some of that in our last presentation. And if you have any questions on taking advantage of that, just give our office a call and we can walk you through that. All right. Let's take a look at some examples. So you got approved for $100,000 PPP. And again, it was for 2.5 months, which is basically 10 weeks over a period. You spend $80,000 in that 8-week period, which is that cover period. Your headcount did not change. Salaries were not reduced more than 25%. You are then definitely eligible for forgiveness of that $80,000. The remaining $20,000 would then qualify for other expenditures that could also be forgiven. And so let's say of that $20,000, you spent 15 on the non-payroll related expenditures, then you would have $5,000 as a loan at the end of this period at 1% over 24 months. Was that clear? Team, was that clear? Did I capture that properly?
That makes sense.
You did.
Example 2, you again, same numbers. You got approved for $100,000. Your expenditures for payroll were $60,000 during the cover period. Example 2A is not considering your safe harbor, so you have met the head count by June 30th. The remaining dollars is $40,000. You spent $20,000 of that on qualified expenses, so you have $80,000. You have $80,000, and Amber, I think, and so I'm going to run through this. I think some of this detail may not be totally where we want it, but you spent $80,000 between your qualified, thank you, between your qualified payroll expenses and your qualified non-payroll expenses. So you have $80,000 of forgivable cost. Then you have a $20,000 loan at 1% over the 24 months. All right. Here we've got 2 other examples, and this will take in your safe harbor. Again, you've got $100,000 of PPP loan. Your payroll was $60,000. You had qualified expenses of $15,000. you're not you've met the safe harbor, so you've kept the level of people. Here you should have $75,000 forgiveness in your request and a $25,000 loan. And again, there's no prepayment penalty. You can, if you didn't spend all of those dollars, if you didn't spend all of those dollars, you can repay that pretty immediately with no prepayment penalty. Second scenario does take into account if you didn't meet that safe harbor, and you will get some penalty for not maintaining that employee headcount. So if we look at this, the same scenario, $100,000 of PPP loan, $60,000 of payroll during that cover period, your qualified expenses are the same, $15,000 for rent, interest, and utilities. You did not maintain, and we're not going in really into the calculation of how that penalty is calculated, but you've received now 18,000 because you didn't maintain, and it's prorated. You didn't maintain the number of employees you needed to maintain. Now you have a penalty of $18,750 that would reduce your forgiveness. That forgiveness now would be $56,250, and you would have a loan amount for $43,750,000. So that safe harbor and that headcount becomes very important. And those calculations, you've got to take a look at, full-time employee equivalents, and there's a whole calculation for that. It's very detailed. We did not include that in this presentation. We suggested, again, give us a call. We can help walk you through your particular scenario so that you don't get caught up in this scenario here and have your forgiveness request reduced. All right, questions. Amber, do we have questions?
So there were a few. Yes, can you hear me?
I can.
All right, so there were a few questions that were placed in the chat. One was, will we receive a copy of the presentation via email?
It will be posted on our website this afternoon.
Okay. The other question, and it's more of a, it's more of a case. Someone had stated that they have applied for the PPP. They have an LLC. They are the sole member. Their LLC is also an S Corp. What they did was they uploaded a 1040 Schedule C because they received a request for a 1040 Schedule C. And they have not heard anything from SBA regarding their PPP. They wonder if their application is still active, and should they have uploaded different documents, and how long does the approval usually take?
So my first question would be, and hopefully they can type this into the chat, is how long ago did they apply?
So the initial, the start of the application was April 24, and it looks like the application was completed 5/11, May 11th.
And they still have not heard anything back from their bank?
Correct.
And so it was approved. They got it.
It does not say that. So I stated that they need to contact their banker, because the banker will have the status of their loan. Also, there is great possibility that they've uploaded the wrong documents.
Correct.
And if that's the case, then they should retract the application and resubmit.
Right, or they can also go to another bank and
And
also
start
put
all
in
over
that
again.
and put in that application.
Correct. Yeah.
You know, so you could have, if you have not already applied or you have not heard anything, you should continue to work with that bank, but you can also apply at another institution who has the ability to give these loans, and it may move faster. Other questions?
Yes. So there's another question. Is there a forgivable cutoff date for employee benefits? Example, we receive PPP funds in April. Can we cover March benefits and it still be forgiven?
I believe the answer on that is no. It needs to be in the covered period.
Okay, and let's see, there was another.
So let's just talk about that real quick. So if for some reason the company was having difficulty paying some of the employees' health insurance, some of the employees' things prior to receiving your PPP funds, you cannot now backload and pay your old bills in that PPP. It's to cover the cost that is incurred in that period. So that is a big piece to the forgiveness. So you could use the money, but it won't be forgiven.
Well, Delbert, another piece of that would be that if the payroll, let's just say that you got the PPP on April 24th, and your payroll period for that started on, let's just say from the 1st of April to the 15th of April, and you paid it on the 26th, that payroll could be covered and could be
Correct.
part of your 8 weeks.
Correct.
And if that's the case, the benefits associated with that could be covered.
Correct.
Yes.
Right. But it can't be 2 months ago.
Mhm.
Unless you pay your employees every 2 months. Next
I wouldn't be
question.
working there. Okay, so another question comment stated, you mentioned that we should reach out to a professional regarding bonuses we may give employees during the PPP period. Would you recommend consulting with my banker about this?
Yes, because ultimately you're going to put that application in with that banker. And so they're going to have certain criteria of documentation and things that they're looking for before they pass that over to SBA for approval. So I highly suggest that you are having that conversation with your banker as well.
And I think it's for this particular person is that there's the group can correct me. There's a difference between bonus structure that has already been put in place with your payment structure, like commissions, above commission within your payroll period, and actual bonuses that are normally given, say, at the end of a quarter, at the end of the year, that is, like a pot, profit sharing, etc.
Right. So, when you look at the way this is designed, the government decided that I will give you a calculation. So no one really should spend their whole PPP on just payroll, right? Because your calculation was 2.5 months, which was 10 weeks of payroll, and then they want you to cover it in an 8-week period. So everyone almost, if the averages are the same, everyone should have money to apply for non-payroll expenses. one of the things that we haven't seen out there is some scenarios that I know Amber and I were speaking about last night, that if your payroll pool has changed from one year to the next, and a lot of times you'll see that with seasonal payroll and those type things, you could have a scenario where your payroll calculation based upon last year is actually higher than your current payroll. And so you could end up not being able to expend all the money that you received in your normal payroll. We're still waiting for some guidance on how that works, but that's not how it was designed. And then you could flip that, and your payroll in the prior year could have been lower. And so the question becomes, can I spend out my PPP faster than the 8 weeks? Well, by design, how they designed it, you shouldn't. But if your payroll in the prior year was less and your payroll is now higher because your payroll pool changed, those scenarios have not all been worked out. And so we're waiting for guidance on some of those type scenarios.
But it would still be forgivable in the fact that you just may have, you can use more than 75% of the fund, less than 75% as far as from a forgiveness standpoint. So
right. Yep. More questions?
Those are the questions that I have.
Okay.
There was an additional question or an additional about the EIDL, but I figure we'll wait because that will be answered when we go through EIDL.
Okay. So let's flip to EIDL. Right now, the application period is closed unless you're an agriculture related type business. The advances again changed from $10,000 per organization to $1,000 per employee, which also included owners and sole proprietors. And so you could have applied and asked for that advance, thought you were getting a $10,000 advance, and you got $1,000 or $2,000 depending on your employee pool. The
and
advance,
it's also what you reported. Because remember, you had to report the number.
right. So when you went on to fill that application out, you had to tell them the number of employees. The advance is a grant, and no reporting requirement was even. It was a very simple application, and then you ask for the advance, and then in a number of weeks that advance ended up in your account if you gave them the account information. Proceeds, again, we mentioned this before, the proceeds from the EIDL advance will be deducted from your forgiveness of your PPP loan. So I think that's an important scenario to make sure that you understand, and it is right on the application. If you have any, if you have not received your advance and you did put an application in, you can call the number that you see on the screen, 1-800-659-2955, to verify your status of where those dollars are, or if you've been approved for those dollars or not. Questions, and Amber now, because that was very short, because that was a very short-lived. There was $10 billion, and that $10 billion went within, I believe, 2 weeks. That $10 billion was gone. And so that application, they did add more money to it, but mostly on the agriculture side. And so those dollars are pretty much gone. Any questions? Amber, you said you had a question on the EIDL. Did Amber leave us? Okay. If anyone has a question, there is a, I think there should be raise your hand thing, or you could just unmute yourself and ask the question since we lost our moderator for, well, our helper for the moment. And actually, we need her because she is taking care of the next section. So that is a big faux pas that just happened for us to lose our next moderator. So I think what I'm gonna do in the time period, Amber again is our tax in charge in the office, has a master's degree in taxation, and also did a lot of the research to prepare us for this today. Oh, she's back. Good. Her audio is coming in. Amber, you took us for a little tizzy there.
My trusty laptop did not warn me that it was dying. I thought the dog had hit my power button and realized I had no juice.
Okay, well, we're happy you're back. Question on the EIDL?
So I apologize if you had questions in there previously, because while I was down, it removed everything that I private chat. So.
All right, so if you
recall what
if you did have that question in there, please retype it in the chat and she will get it and we will attempt to answer that question. And we can do it at any time. So I think what we'll do is we will move on to the next section that we're so happy that Amber came back so that she can cover the unemployment situation. Amber, I'll click through so you could just tell me when you need me to click.
Okay. All right. So we've covered this in our previous Zoom meetings, but as you all should know, is that there are now 2 unemployment options due to COVID. There's your regular unemployment, which I'm labeling as PAUC. And then there is unemployment that are available for everyone who does not qualify for regular PAUC. The thing to keep in mind for the PAUC for those who are business owners is that anyone who is claiming unemployment, it will not increase your rate. Your rate will not be affected by those who need to file unemployment. And those who are currently receiving unemployment, your employees who are currently receiving it, they should have received some notification of payment, if not already be on the payment schedule. So I have seen in some of the chat areas around the PA unemployment is that they've been seeing $0 amounts, but not the actual claim for the week. And to my understanding, PA is doing this to keep the people in the system. So the week that they're supposed to be paid, but their payment has not yet been fully processed, they're doing a $0 verification. So, take that as reassurance that your money is due to come. The federal portion, which is the FPUC, the last payment date for that is July 25th. Now, there's no guidance as of right now whether or not there will be, back pay for that. If the payments, say for instance, unemployment does not catch up until that time. But what I do know is that I think July 25th is that final date. So if you apply for unemployment, say July 1st, you may only get 1 month of the FPUC, even though you're eligible for unemployment thereafter. So the interesting thing for the PUA is that, if you can see, I highlighted that it includes those who are self-employed, gig workers, which are like your Uber drivers, and now your Instacart delivery people. Delbert, go back, please.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Those who lack work history, part-time workers that would not normally qualify for PAUC, those who have exhausted their regular PAUC, I should say unemployment, not employment, and those who do not qualify for PAUC. So those particular people, for instance, let's say the do not qualify for PAUC. If you know someone who did not have a work history, but now due to COVID, they are required to take care of an entire family, or they have been labeled as ineligible for work due to contracting COVID, complications of COVID, anything that is COVID related that can also be documented through doctor's excuse, they are eligible for PAUC. And I encourage them to file for PAUC. I mean, not PAUC, the PUA. The way that the claims are working for PUA is that you file on a weekly basis versus a bi-weekly. And if things are running properly, your deposit was to be expected within 3 days following the end of that week claim. 1 second.
Well, we know that.
Sorry. No, my family was doing their screaming from the bottom of the house to the top of the house.
Okay.
Yeah. And that PUA is eligible up until December 25th of 2020. Then it goes away. Okay, you can go on to the next.
So when you're applying, is there a different place to apply?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, and I'll get to that in the questions. So some common questions or comments or things that have happened. A person has filed through regular UC and was denied, but they think they may qualify for the PUA. So there is a separate portal for applying for PUA versus applying for the PAUC. If you've applied for the PAUC and have been denied because you don't qualify for PAUC, then open up an application under PUA. There's a different set of documents that would be required for the PUA. I would rather not get into all of that, but if you were denied for PAUC and you do qualify for PUA, the PAUC denial will not affect your PUA application. Anything to add? I see John and David look like they're.
Yeah. No.
No, we're just clarifying amongst ourselves. Good.
Yeah.
Okay. If you're unable to reach unemployment to confirm your benefits, what shall you do? There is a chat service on the the unemployment website. I highly, highly encourage that you go through that method. The last time that I communicated with them via the chat box was during the peak of the application process, and I was able to get a hold of someone within 15 minutes and have all of my questions answered. And I would imagine that it would be a little bit quicker now because people have PIN numbers, they have, things traceable for their application, whereas that wasn't the case before the application even came out for the PUA. If you're not able to find that chat, hit me up. I can show you exactly where it is and how to navigate that process. So, and then the big question is, what makes you ineligible for UC or PUA? So if you reject an offer for work for any reason that is not COVID-19 related, that person is not eligible for unemployment at all. Or if you resume alternative types of work. So for instance, if you went from being an Uber driver and now you're delivering groceries for Instacart, you're currently gainfully employed, you do not qualify for PUA unless you can prove that there is a disparity in the amount that you were receiving prior to the amount that you're receiving now. Like a decrease in hours or something along those lines. Also, for those who've been self-employed, and say, for instance, your prior year showed that you were at a net loss, whereas you wouldn't have qualified for a PPP due to those circumstances, you would still be qualified for the PUA under those circumstances. But where you would more than likely be placed is that you will receive the minimum benefit that the state allows, which is like, I think $195 per week, plus the FPUC per week until July 25th. If you remain, unable, or you remain where you're not receiving, gainful work, then you will continue with the 195 until December 25th, hypothetically. Next.
Questions? Do you have any in the queue?
I have no questions in my chat.
All right. So what we'll do.
Anything to add? Did I miss anything, David?
No, I think what to note is, right, if you have any chance of qualifying for even $1 from the state, you get the full $600 for the federal side. So I wouldn't discount that process. If you get a chance, just apply. And you never know what's going to happen. They may extend it, the whole stuff. So don't hold back.
Yeah, it's just not.
Just be honest on the application, and you'll get what you.
Yeah, you have to understand that it's not just the state monies that you would may or may not qualify for. You could possibly not qualify on the state level, but you could qualify on the federal level.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Explore both options and know that both options are.
All right. So if there are no further questions on unemployment, I believe the next section is we want to talk about the HEROES Act, and we're going to have David and John cover that for us. This is what's coming up.
Wow. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Dave's going to handle it. Dave did the research on this. So,
well, the HEROES Act, right? That's was just recently passed by the House last Friday. It's called the Helping Emergency Responders Overcome Emergency Situations Act. It's a mouthful. It is a $3 trillion package, just like I said, just narrowly passed by the House. The Republican-controlled Senate really doesn't give it much. It's putting it lightly, any chance of enabling that into law. But we'll just hit a couple of the highlights because, as it goes through the negotiation process, some things may carry through, some things, may not. And in the $3 trillion package, it's $1 trillion will go to the state and local governments, just to really replace the lost tax revenue that's going to occur, as well as to fund, public works and new public services that are required because of the pandemic. $200 billion is earmarked there for hazard pay for the essential workers that are frontline workers. Another $175 billion in housing assistance for renters and homeowners who are impacted by the pandemic. Another $75 billion for expanded COVID-19 testing. And then the next slide there are some of the things that extensions on what we've been speaking about here earlier. It's additional $10 billion for the EIDL grants. The proposed extension of the $600 per week, the federal unemployment piece from July to January of 2021. Additional IRS stimulus checks for up to $1,200 per person, which now also takes into account any dependents you may have. So for example, the old one, you could get up to $2,400 per married filing jointly. But now if you have dependents, you can get $1,200 for them too, up to $6,000 per household. So a little add-on.
So that change was, or that change is being looked at. Instead of getting $500 for the dependent, is now actually getting $1,200 for the dependent.
Right, but there's a cap on $6,000 per household. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I
And
need to find me a dependent.
It also adds monies for COBRA subsidies for employer paid health care for those that have been laid off. The employee retention tax credits that Amber mentioned earlier, there's an extension on those in the bill, as well as a 15% increase in the food stamp program. It is a pretty comprehensive bill. Again, the Republican-controlled Senate. Mitch McConnell, I think, was quoted as saying it's a partisan bill that has no chance of becoming law. But I'm sure it'll get negotiated once they're back in session after the Memorial Day holiday, and then from there, again, it's unsure what'll happen, but at least some things are on the table. And I guess depending on how the testing and the vaccine goes, I mean, these things will be in and out of the news, in and out of the Senate. So that's just what's on the table now.
So I think some of the idea is that some of this will pass because, I mean, your workers in the front end, your healthcare workers and things like that will get taken care of. And so,
in some way, shape, or form, something will come through. I mean, there's a bunch of things attached to it that really aren't related to this pandemic that I didn't mention here that are always looking at it. So,
yeah, I think it's going to depend a lot on, we're opening up, right? The states are kind of opening up. Every state has a plan to open up. See what, if there's a recurrence or a rebound.
Second wave.
Cases, right? And so if we get that, then it's much more likely that something else will pass, I think. If we're able to kind of open up and not have serious COVID issues, then maybe this will be reduced. But when I look at this, I think there's a good chance that programs that are now in place could be extended. I think that's the highest likelihood here. Would you agree with that, Delbert?
I agree.
The programs that are working.
Working, right.
Working.
Right.
Well, at least they think they're working.
Yeah.
Yeah, so those probably have the highest likelihood of being extended.
All right. Any questions, Amber?
Nothing has come through the chat.
Okay. All right. So that kind of ends our session. I also want you to know that our office, even though we are working remotely, our office is working every day from the same dining room table that I'm speaking to you now is where I'm at most of my day. And so we are working. And if you call the office, it will route to an individual or someone's phone to take a message. So leave a message, we will get back, but we are working. I will tell you, and this is not my mode, if you know me, I will forge ahead on things. This is one of those things I don't want to put my employees at any risk. We are going to wait until at least this initial wave of going back to work is done and take a look at what the results are. So we will not be back in the office probably until mid to end of June, and that's only if this first wave goes well. And so I am being precautious. We do, unfortunately, have a number of people in our office who are high risk, including myself, and I'm going to protect them at all costs. So, but we are working. We have all our technology. We've learned more in the last 8 weeks than some of us wanted to, and so but we are available and look forward to hearing from you. Everybody have a blessed and great day. Thank you.
Stay safe.
Yeah.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.